I've always been a fan of Turso, mostly just because of how easy it is to get a remote SQLite database up and running. I've been a fan of Turso mostly because if I'm building something and hosting it on Laravel Vapor, then I want something that isn't RDS. I want something extremely simple that I could just connect to. And if you're in a serverless setting like AWS, you can't really have a persisted SQLite database, but you can with Turso. But I just saw this announcement that Turso has now dropped a new driver specifically for Laravel PHP. And why don't we give it a look and see what's up? I've talked about Turso a couple of times. I actually built a full project using Turso with a multi-tenant database in the sense that, okay, every single time a new user is created in your application, you're generating a new Turso database. And it's easy because they have an API where you can just generate a new database and figuring out, okay, where do those environment variables live? And now I'm connecting to it. But I think this new driver should make that a lot easier, because one of the things that it's tricky with the libsql, I think it would have a sanctioned community driver in the sense that it was officially supported or maybe sanctioned or at least encouraged by Turso team. But now I think they have their own one. So let's take a look. Announcing Laravel support and PHP PDO interface. Laravel continues to grow rapidly in popularity. It's a de facto framework for PHP, and many people have been keen to use it with Turso. While it's technically already been available to use with Turso through community drivers, we're excited to launch official Laravel support with libsql Laravel, our new open source SDK. This is the bread and butter, because Turso, I could be getting this completely wrong, but Turso forked SQLite to create libsql. And because there's some additional benefits on top of SQLite, it needed specific extensions within PHP, which meant it was tricky to use unless you were downloading specific extensions, and depending on where you're hosting your Laravel application, that package might be tricky to use. I'm curious of how they resolved this, maybe, or at least used something different, I'm imagining. Okay, what this means for Laravel developers: we have drop-in SQLite compatibility. Compatible code migrations will work with Turso without modification. That's always nice. I'm curious then, because I know, so for example, like Laravel database drivers, if we take a look at the specific database, we don't necessarily have, Laravel does not have a specific SQLite. It has a SQLite driver, but not libsql, which was a different database. So I'm imagining this is probably a package from Turso to kind of get that up and running. So we have simple configuration. Okay, database URL, a native Laravel connection. So integrates with the connection factory and database manager. Okay, looks all great. Turso libsql Laravel update env. And is that it? That's pretty crazy. Why don't I run through this? Because I'm curious of like how this is working, especially when a lot of the things that you lose out on libsql. If you wanted to, in the past, when I was using Turso, most of the time I just needed to connect to something quick to have a database storage without having to spin up a whole new RDS database. That was most of what I was using for, especially for my smaller projects. But I really couldn't tap into the embedded replicas or vector stuff because it wasn't supported, or it was just tricky to get it running in my particular setup. So let's make this happen. Why don't I jump into my code editor and spin up a new starter kit using my Fission starter kit, and then we'll see what's up. Maybe we'll do a gh repo clone, and then we'll say Josh Siri Fission. And why don't we call this Turso check? Turso check. I'm just going to run my install script, which basically just gets everything set up and running for me within this particular application. We'll say yes, and then we'll run PHP Artisan Solo, which should get us up and running, and we are good to go. So this is my Fission starter kit, and now let's connect to Turso. I apologize back and forth between switching between light mode and dark mode with my actual page and then the Turso documentation. Here's your warning. Avert your eyes. So we're going to go ahead and composer require Turso Laravel. We'll go ahead and do that. Okay, so Spatie Laravel package tools. We've got libsql Laravel and libsql by Turso, and everything looks like everything's good to go there. We need to update our env with credentials. So we have db connection, a Turso database URL, and a Turso auth token. I'm going to hide my screen real quick and just push that in. Okay, I've got my environment variables all set up. I'm going to add this libsql driver to my database.php. And now we should be good to go. So we omit the URL and password to use libsql locally, but we're not going to use it locally. We're going to be connected and just pushing everything up, even though our app is set up locally. It is nice to know you can still use libsql locally, though. I don't necessarily know what that means in the sense that maybe, I don't know, you can still use the embedded replicas and vector embedding. All right, let's go ahead and just follow the instructions that it gives. I'm curious to see what this enables for us. So we're going to make a model with a movie and make a migration for it as well. Let's do that. So PHP artisan make model movie, and we're going to make a migration for it. Perfect. Let's go ahead and put these fillables and have a cast, a vector cast, which looks like it uses libsql Laravel vector cast. It's very interesting. So in the movie, so we have this vector cast that we're going to bring in from libsql Laravel vector cast. Now we set up the migration to create the movies table, which is a plot embedding, which is a vector. Okay, a 5-dimensional vector. Very interesting. I don't necessarily know if I've ever used vector in a migration before. I do use PG vector, and I can't remember off the top of my head if I use a vector column. I imagine I probably do, but I thought it was something else. It's probably vector. And now we're going to create a vector index. So I'm assuming what the vector index is doing is this is going to give us the ability to search on that vector column. So we're going to create a add vector index to movies table. And I'm assuming this vector index cannot be done. It's not like I can in here say that I want to add a vector index or even a vector index. It probably has to be separate for a particular reason. I don't necessarily know. It'd be nice if I could maybe see it right here, because that's something that is really interesting to me to know, okay, is this the best way to do it every single time? That's what we're going to do. Let's go ahead and create that vector index migration there. And we want to add to the table, add that vector index plot embedding. Okay. And did I call it a plot embedding? Okay, we did. So it's basically just saying I want to add a vector index to the plot embedding column and have this movies plot embedding IDX. Now we run our migrations, okay, and it's taking a little bit slower because we are connecting locally, not locally, but we are connecting to that Turso database. If I was to pull up Turso, we should see now some data. And if I was to edit this, I believe they have, Drizzle Studio, outer base, embedded outer base. If I was to open up in Drizzle Studio, for example, I should see information now. So yeah, we have our movies. I also have my migrations as well. So the sessions and pan analytics, for example, where let's say if I was to, I believe in the playground, I believe I have a data pan playground button. So if I was to set up or log into my account, strict enabled, I don't know why I'm getting that error. Let's go ahead. So I didn't actually know what FI API is, but it looks like it is a specific PHP INI setting, because when I changed it in my herd config to FFI.enable equals true, it looks like everything's working now. So let's go ahead and create a new account and we should be good to go. So Josh, that created a new account in the Turso database, because if I was to open this back up and look at the users table, for example, we should see, yes, there is my name and email. And I want to show that if I check on playground and click on this hi everyone button, we should now see that information in the pan analytics. And sure enough, if we open up the terminal and I run PHP artisan pan, we'll grab that from the database as well. And it looks like database analytics repository. Okay, it looks like the pan analytics that I've been using by Nuno Maduro, it looks like maybe something is not set up properly for something other than the typical database connection strings. But that's okay. The cool part is that everything seems to be working now. Well, now let's go ahead and see that whole movie setup where we can then vector search based off of it. Okay, and it says, for example, you can create a new movie, and then you're able to find similar movies like this. And I wonder if we can find a way to create a whole bunch of different movies. But this is basically on a super basic level. It looks like there's specific plot embeddings, and then we can query based off of other embeddings. And so you would use this with something like OpenAPI's embedding search, where you're basically saying, okay, hey, here's all this information about a movie. Store this as an embedding, and then you would put that in that plot embedding column. But then we can just search based off of this query, it looks like. So movie query nearest the movie's plot embedding IDX with this specific query vector. So yeah, if I was to create a new movie, and in the playground, let's go ahead and just say this is a public function add movie, and we'll just say movie is this, and then if we were to wire this up, say like wire click equals add movie, then in order to find similar movies, you would do something like this. And what we could do is just say, I don't know, create a new function called public function find movies. And we'll just say, why don't we just dd similar movies. So what should happen is if we were to create a new button, we'll just say flux button wire click equals find movies. Now in our application, what we should see is two buttons being able to say, okay, this hi everyone button, it adds a new movie. Oh, call to undefined cast. Interesting. So plot embedding, maybe we didn't save that model. Let's go ahead and say the movie model. Did we not save this? Let's go ahead and refresh. Okay, there we go. We probably didn't save that model since we created it. And then find similar movies. We should, no such column, to-dos.row ID. Interesting. I don't know where the to-dos is coming from, but we're adding something to the database. So if I was to recheck like this movies, for example, yeah, we have two matrix added, but no plot embeddings. That's really interesting. I guess it's an array buffer. Maybe I just can't see it. So I'm guessing I'm doing something wrong, or maybe just something's not set up properly within my set. So I'm cutting in real quick because while editing, I did see that the Turso libsql Laravel driver in GitHub did have a issue, a pull request that was actually merged about 20 hours ago, where there was an issue with specifically to-dos.row.id that is still, looks like it wasn't fully merged or fully released into the new release. So if I was to take a look at the package itself and the actual releases, there's two that are tagged 0.1.1, but that does not include that specific PR. So that is probably where the issue is coming from. I would imagine if you just pulled the libsql Laravel from the actual main branch, the latest dev branch, then it should be good to go. Back to the video. But the cool part is that this is out of the box for you within, like if I was doing PG SQL within Laravel, for example, I can't remember exactly how I was doing it, but I don't believe you have that easy search of vector. So let's see if I can find something. PG vector. Okay, yeah, I think I did. I do remember having to do a DB statement instead of having to do like that index. So that becomes a lot easier if I'm doing a specific vector index within a migration. So that becomes easier. Okay, yeah, we're casting to a vector. Looks like that was the PG vector package that was recommended. Yeah, I think the difference in what you're able to do within like the nearest, for example, it is really interesting because however this is being stored is a little bit different than what you would store in PG Vector, which it looks like usually would have to do like an order by raw, like I want this particular embedding based off of if it's closest to this embedding, which is you kind of push it into vector. So I'm curious of like how you would get this query vector which again is probably through something like OpenAI. I wonder if this would be a good example, like what Prism by TJ is doing, TJ Miller. I wonder if he's doing anything with vectors. Let's see. Yeah, embeddings. Here we go. Yeah, so you can generate embeddings with just a few lines of code within Prism, which is great. So you can have, you're saying, okay, I want to generate from the embeddings. I want to say that this is the text. And in this case, you would put like your movie description or movie name, or maybe just all of it. I would imagine you can do more than just text. I've done that before, or it just could be like a huge line of text. And now you have your embeddings. And this is what I would believe you would then put into your plot embedding, where you could say, okay, I would do something like this, where to add movie, I would get the Prism embeddings and then place this into the embeddings. And it depends like what it's given back as array. But this is a good example of how you can use multiple things like Turso's vector embeddings and not have to worry about setting a PG extension with PG vector, and use something like Prism, which I'm hoping to do a little bit more of a deep dive to say, okay, I'm generating these embeddings and now I can just work with them because I have the information I need from something like OpenAI to have this group of information boiled down into this vector. Overall, super excited for what the team is doing at Turso, and I think this just adds a little bit more options for what you're doing within Laravel. Like if you wanted to do vector embeddings, which to me is probably one of the bigger selling points of something like libsql, and as well as embedded replicas, like stuff like that is really interesting because you have what feels like a very fast database because it's being embedded in your, like on your application, as well as being a remote connection. But then also just being able to have like those vectors without having to do something like PGSQL, which is a separate extension. So even if you have access to your Postgres database, you still have to make sure that you add that extension, then you do all this extra stuff. It still is great, but having this is another great option as well. So I love what the Turso team is doing. Allows you to keep building, keep creating.